I don't think that people are going to be ready for how the LPL plays. Ooh. Welcome to Vision Isle, one and all. My name is Sam, and this is Worlds Watch. If you are new to the channel, I watch every single playoff game of the given season time before the international tournaments that happen, this time for summer. Yes, including that one right before Worlds comes up. Currently for this particular video, I apologize, I am late. I did not feel great yesterday. But we're going to be covering all of the series between August 12th to 17th. So about 15 particular best of fives. The LPL has been done for a while, so it's going to be all of the regions except the LEC, who have yet to start. So the LCK, the VCS, PCS, LCS, CBLOL, I believe that's, and the LGL. I don't know if the LGL, yeah, and the LGL. We're going to be taking a look at a lot of different things, including some of the apprehensions I have regarding the ability for a lot of these particular regions, and including some of the teams that are qualified to actually compete against the higher level due to a whole lack of consistency, a whole lack of proactivity, things that we've talked about before, but I'm not seeing anything in sight about improvements yet. But first, let's take a look at the best of fives that we've viewed. If ever you want to see these while I have finished them, the link down below will have for my TikTok in which I post these. So without further ado, and we're back with the LCK's upper bracket semifinals. We've got ourselves T1 versus Gen.G. And congrats to Gen.G on being the 7th team to qualify for Worlds. Now, the series is incredibly bizarre. Both teams at moments show incredible neutral, map, macro, vision, and coordinated play, while in other games they seem completely lost in some aspects. Now, T1, for their part, continue to, their bizarre draft options that they hold as they make their life harder. For God's sakes, people need to stop drafting Vayne. Well, Gen.G seemed to be super slow on the uptake for the win conditions at some points, mostly playing on the general step-by-step default of play. The two teams show that they are definitely world's caliber in some of the most baffling ways. Any misstep from their opponents is ballooned like no tomorrow. Neither waste time or hesitate on their win conditions, or especially on how to end the game, and both always try to find ways to fight back control or crawl their way back from a deficit. I think that it'll be no time before T1 secures their slot at Worlds, and that Gen.G got theirs well deserved. My MVP for the series is Pace, who was such a consistent player throughout the series and really stepped up when it counted in Game 5. And we're back with the PCS's Round 1 upper bracket. We got ourselves the LCO's first representative, the Chiefs, versus 4th seed from PCS, Deep Cross Gaming, in the Southeast Asian PCS playoffs. And, another LCO team bites the dust. Granted, here, right, the Chiefs had strong early game with some solid vision and understanding of how to intercept DCG's win conditions. That said, the transition for any particular leads almost never happened. And the one game they did win was mostly off of a throw from Deep Cross. Now, Deep Cross on their part have a solid amount of coordination and roll for roll are stronger in some significant capacity. But that said, the weaker early game, bizarre macro choices, inconsistent vision approach, and inability to properly and cleanly close out games has me convinced that they won't be able to beat the Talons, let alone be world's caliber. Also, BioPanther, buddy, go to the LCS. Your skill level is there for it. Please. My MVP for this series is Mission, who applied the most amount of pressure regardless of the champion he played. And we're back with Japan's LJL round 3 in the lower bracket. We got FENNEL versus Sengoku Gaming. And it looks like Sengoku really wants that spring rematch. Now, Sengoku continue to show some steady improvement the more series that they play. That said, the teams they face had some of the most bizarre answers to the macro play that they had. Honestly, Sengoku Gaming had stronger coordination, better vision, asterisks, a solid understanding of their win conditions, while FENNEL struggled to even adapt game to game with all the different strategies that Sengoku had planned. Now, the asterisk, by the way, is, granted, how is it that 3 different instances FENNEL was able to sneak the Baron just from the lack of vision in the area or any of the areas that could tip off the situation? And that's just the thing with Sengoku. They take some truly unnecessary risks when ahead in the game, and that'll just slow everything down or even cost them the game entirely. Looking forward, this team shows a chance at contesting the slot for the LJL, but the glaring risks are enough for me to still be unconvinced that they are world's caliber. My MVP of the series is NT, who is an absolute Chad in the way he set up so many plays. And we're back with Vietnam's first playoff in the VCS. We're into round 1. We got ourselves Team Flash versus Saigon Buffaloes. And the dedication to very awkward styles has me laughing with hilarity. The series was hilarious. Now, Team Flash, who has a chance in the lower bracket from round 3, included some of the strongest early game vision, macro, and skirmish play around. They knew their win conditions, how to work towards them, and how to neutralize their opponents. If only the Buffaloes didn't play neutrals better, or had stronger coordination, or were better at adaptation from game to game. Honestly, some very strong drafting and adaptation going on. Now, the Buffaloes do have some weaknesses in regards to their rushed plays and poor vision control in general, but they understand the pace of the game and how to balloon leads when they can win fights. Buffaloes have shown some solid signs as a potential representatives, especially in the department of adaptation, but not quite there, especially as they keep skipping steps. My MVP of the series is Shogun. I mean, honestly, watch the guy on Varus or Nyla and tell me that's not some MVP material. The guy was just fucking popping off. And we're back with Brazil's CBLOL's upper bracket round 1. We've got INTZ versus Pain Gaming. With reckless abandon do I find these teams play. There is a bit of unease when I see 2 teams play with such solid vision and yet don't ever use it properly. Now, INTZ held some of the strongest early and mid-game play amongst these 2 teams. Better neutral setup, vision, draft adaptation. All the while, Pain Gaming played stock standard and pretty comfortable. Once the late game would roll around, it's as if INTZ had a stroke, and all of their solid approach, their decision making, anything of value just kind of disappears. The last game especially, so many teams I've seen fall into the trap of going to get Elder against a team that can melt turrets like nothing. Heck, Ninja Kiwi manages to take the mid inhib in less than 4 seconds while the turret was still there. They could have kept going as his team distracts to win, and instead TPs to join in to his team getting clean aced. Now, Pain play standard fairly well, but not to a point where I can say they are world's caliber. All 3 games were won against a team that lost steam post 21 minutes. And this, to me, is not a good sign against anybody else they might face locally or internationally. My MVP of the series is B-Boy, whose super aggressive style managed to clutch the series often. And we're back with North America's LCS's upper bracket semifinal. We've got ourselves NRG versus Cloud9. This is the LCS's 2 representatives so far. Is this not concerning? Now, from the look of things, both teams have some solid adaptations, some excellent vision, great understanding of their win conditions, some kind of okay coordination. World's caliber in a lot of aspects until I look at the performances holistically. NRG show higher standards of play and a little more consistency, but struggling to properly convert leads and close out games is a major concern. Cloud9, for their part, concerned me even more. On multiple occasions, all of their players show some more than others, the want to play hero and create unnecessary risks in the hope to either balloon leads, regain losses, or come back from the game in a deficit. And when it does work, it's pretty great. It looks excellent. But it showed to me that Cloud9 as a whole doesn't quite have the full confidence in themselves. And in international play, that'll be the doom at that point. I mean, how many games do we need for their opponents to throw massive leads away before we start asking ourselves, is Cloud9 as good as their score indicates? My MVP of the series is Berserker, who continues to be the most consistent player around. And we're back with the LCK's lower bracket round 3. We got Hanwha Life Esports versus KT Rolsters. Now, this particular KT looks terrifying once we hit late game. The early to mid game play, mostly standard, creating a lot of confusion for me, as it seemed like they were content with letting Hanwha Life hold full tempo control. Honestly, there's too many neutrals given up. But once we hit the mid to late game, the vision play, coordination, neutrals, and how they close out games especially is excellent. Now, do I think they'll win their rematch against T1 for the next series is kind of up in the air, but it really depends if they properly play the early game. But honestly, again, who knows? Between the telecom wars is a little crazy. What I do know for sure is that their world's caliber, at least against weaker teams, there is a nice amount of decisiveness that some international teams will not be ready for if they do qualify. I'm pretty sure they will. Now, Hanwha Life, for their part, kind of confused me. They have standard solid early play, some great vision, decent adaptation, excellent neutral play overall, but as time goes on and they play more and more passive, it's just frustrating. Hopefully, as they wait for regionals and they end up there, they'll play better, but right now, they aren't world's caliber. My MVP of the series is BDD, who it does a lot to enable his team for these particular team fight setups. Just so good. And we're back with Southeast Asia's PCS's upper bracket round 2. We got ourselves Taipei J Team versus MegaBank Beyond Gaming. And what happens when the clearly better team just does nothing for 3 games straight? Let's be frank, alright? J Team had the stronger vision application, better adaptation, better neutral setups, better early and mid game. Then they would just start to do nothing with their leads. Not push it, not balloon it, not choke resources. They would wait until Beyond Gaming would do anything. The issue is that Beyond Gaming is a proactive team. So while their vision, coordination, neutral setups, adaptation wasn't necessarily better, it certainly wasn't so much worse that they would just wait to be slowly crushed by one of the slowest teams around. Beyond Gaming held firm with their proactivity and had the coordination to recognize winning fights and knew exactly when their win conditions were met so that they could pressure their leads and balloon them. By God, J-Team, do something in your next series, please. My MVP of the series is Betty, whose Kaisa's performance was pretty incredible. Why did they let him have it for like 3 games in a row? And we're back with Japanese LJL's lower bracket semifinals. We got ourselves Sengoku Gaming versus Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks Gaming. God, the Hawks need a better name than that. Now, the Hawks showed to be the team who held better adaptations and draft, stronger approach to neutrals, and a little bit more level-headed. All while Sengoku had a lot more proactivity and gumption with some better vision overall, but kept making drafts a lot harder for them to even approach in the game. Neither team showed either strong planning, and were still very slow, to a point where it was kind of hard to tell why they wouldn't either try to close out games or make certain plays. Now, the Hawks especially felt like a team that was trying to play way too safe for like any good. When it came down to any late game skirmishes around neutrals, we wound up with two teams creating very rushed and sloppy setups just to get ahead. It's very hard for me to even believe or see that the Hawks would take the win against Detonation Focus Me for the slot at Worlds. The lack of proactivity really hurts. My MVP of the series is Dasher, who actually took things in his own hands to get stuff done for the team. And we're back with Vietnam's round 1. We got CERBERUS versus Team Secret. Quite honestly, this was a game of chicken from both ends. Both created drafts that require someone to make the first move, but if you fuck it up, then you wind up losing. Because the coordination is a little wonky with great vision, honestly. We have huge gaps of time where both teams were incredibly hesitant to make any moves. Now, Team Secret, for their part, were more proactive overall, but were also subject to the most regressive play once a mistake was made, while CERBERUS holding advantages make it seem like they were less willing to make any particular mistakes at that point. The mistakes they do make, either side, were really strange, making moments that make it seem like people just switched bodies. Like, how many neutral throws can there be in one series? I do, however, appreciate how both teams use side lane pressures excellently in their 1-3 or 1-4 setup with some excellent vision. But the pace of the game with the lack of proactivity concerns me for both sides. My MVP of the series is Hasman, who almost single-handedly brought Team Secret to the Silver Scrapes. And we're back with Brazil's CBLOL's round 1 upper bracket. We got ourselves Red Canids Kalunga versus Loud. And it's just another case of a team that on paper looks fantastic, but just doesn't know how to use their leads. The Red Canids show us some fantastic adaptation, understanding of win conditions, vision play, neutral setup, and combo that with the coordination on top of it, and it looks like a team that, quite honestly, was really close to being world's caliber, at least to the standard of the CBLOL. But then we have issues where 2 to 4K leads just never grow, and then 20 minutes roll around, and Loud wind up with a significantly better understanding of their win conditions and better coordination. I find it disheartening to see a team like Red do so well in early game but not really push it forward, while Loud have the opposite issue in the more annoying way. Once a lead is established, ballooning is done very well, closing out games has no issues, and it looks like a dominant team. The fact that they have not been able to find a single lead in the early to mid game across all 4 games is concerning, especially moving forward, which means that I don't see either team being world's caliber, although their vision play for both sides was really good. My MVP is Robo, who found ways to shut down whole skirmishes 1v3 on the regular within this series. And we're back with North America's LCS's lower bracket round 3. We got Golden Guardians versus Team Liquid, and congratulations to Team Liquid on being the 8th team to qualify for Worlds. Now, holy shit, I could not be more frustrated with 2 teams like these ones. For starters, both teams gain map pressure and play around vision pretty excellently. And that's about as great as it's going to get. The coordination between the teams is fine, sure, but both teams also hold issues of either not knowing how to balloon their leads or close out games. The Guardians, for their part, will gain massive leads, but as it balloons, they won't close out the games properly and slow steam out rapidly, just hoping to find any catch or mistake that won't go anywhere. While Team Liquid, with smaller leads, take forever to balloon into anything, only really closing out when a mistake are unforced. Neither team are world's caliber, and I find myself doubtful of how well Team Liquid will do in the international stage, or how well the Guardians will do for the last slot at Worlds against the 4th seed of the LEC, which hasn't even been determined yet. My MVP for this series is APA for how he enabled the team fights for his team. And we're back with Southeast Asia's PCS round 2 upper bracket. We got ourselves Deep Cross Gaming versus Paris Saint-Germain Esports Talon, or PSG Talons for easier go. There is a point in which you have to consider if a team is at the top because of their macro skills or because of intimidation. Now, the Talons find themselves with incredible coordination, but only when their target selection makes sense, incredible vision when absurdly ahead, solid macro choices when the opponent is sleeping at the wheel. The entire time I had been just waiting to see if the Talons would make winning plays from their own doing, and instead the proactive plays were really sloppy and the reactive ones were the ones that got them ahead. Deep Cross, on their part, had better vision, neutral setup, adaptation, and sometimes better coordination, looking like a better team overall, but it seems that no matter how well they would balloon leads, closing them out, or even pulling off proper macro choices just wasn't there. The series had me feeling like neither were even close to being strong world contenders, or at least for the moment, but this was a messy series. My MVP of the series is Maple, who constantly looked for angles to get the game going. And we're back with Latin America's LLA's lower bracket semifinals. We got 6 Karma versus Estral Esports. And it was a near reverse sweep. Now, 6 Karma showed to be the better team in regards to macro, vision play, draft adaptation, and most of the core applications of the game itself. That said, when it came down to ballooning their leads and having a consistent approach to it, or even closing out the games, it was kind of nightmarish. I mean, which isn't much better for Estral, who showed to be a little bit more coordinated and have better sense for neutral objectives overall, but again, ballooning leads, closing out games, or even some target selections just seemed to be out of reach. Oftentimes, both teams clearly prepared to end a game, and yet the ways that both teams would toss away leads in some of the most baffling ways bothers me. This is not like a great sign for Estral as they head into the finals. It's hard for me to even consider either of these teams to be world caliber, and likely Rainbow Seven will win out the rematch as well in the finals, but this is not a great look for Latin America. My MVP of the series is Hanwha, who stayed the most consistent out of all of the players and was quite honestly fantastic to watch in these team fights. And we're back with Southeast Asia's PCS's Round 1 lower bracket. We got ourselves from Oceania the LCO's Team Bliss versus CTBC Flying Oysters of the PCS. Man, what happens when you have a team that has such clear understandings of what they need to do, the approach, so the first 10 minutes are pretty flawless, only to lose mid-game because you can't execute on the skirmishes? You get Team Bliss. I have a lot of hopes for this particular squad, at least in terms of how they impressed me, but just without the ability to balloon leads, it doesn't matter how good the vision, neutrals, draft adaptation are. And quite honestly, the Flying Oysters, for their part, were harder to evaluate, mostly because it didn't even look like they were trying. So many mistakes that were had were kind of useless in some sense. No game pace was lost, and most of the fights came into their favor, even when it was done through a mistake of theirs. Heck, they selected a Vayne and still won, showing that they did indeed understand how much better they were than Team Bliss. Now, we'll have to see how they play against DCG, but this wasn't nearly enough. It should have been a way more dominant if they were going to be world's caliber. My MVP of this particular series is Shun, again, just really because how they managed to use a Vayne. That's pretty much it. Yeah. Well, those series were kind of a little bit all over the place. Some of them more frustrating than others, especially a lot of the PCS ones where, again, they should not have LCO teams in them. Just keep... If we're going to do the whole thing, the LCO should not participate. If they are going to participate in Worlds, give them their slot back. I don't know. But aside from that, even from a perspective of how the top 2 LCO teams did and every other team, I came across this weird habit amongst my notes of seeing teams have either excellent or terrible early games, and regardless of the fact that they had an excellent early game and are great in adaptation, have all the check marks of a solid world's caliber team, but cannot balloon leads or close out games properly. And it happening every so often is fine, but it being a recurring behavior and issue amongst these teams is not a great or solid look for them at all. And then when I compare it to the 4 teams that have qualified from the LPL, teams who decisively are very solid in their approach to how they close out games and find leads, I'm only really thinking about the LCK teams being able to keep up in any particular way. Granted, the LEC teams have not played. The VCS team has had mostly their lower bracket teams play. And so, like, there is room still for some of the other regions and some of the other teams to prove that to be the case. But as far as the LCS teams, especially, the Latin American teams, the CBLOL, from Brazilian teams, most regions I cannot say are actually going to be prepared. And where previous years I was seeing this as being like, ooh, we're going to come up into a very competitive year, or there's a nice little hope for things to be pretty close. I don't think that's going to be the case this year. But that's most of my thoughts for what happened this week. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Again, which have been your favorite series so far? Which ones are you looking forward to? I think I'm actually going to be starting the LEC ones for this week. As a reminder, I cannot keep up with these on live. That would be darn near impossible. But by the time that the last ones come in, I might be. I would also like to hear your thoughts. Do you think that the regions will be able to stay within a competitive reach with the LPL and LCK? Or is it just going to be one of those situations where we're going to get 8 for 8 slots in the last best of 5s, just LCK and LPL teams? It's a little early to tell, but the writing's on the wall. Love to hear any and all of your thoughts in the comments down below. Again, thank you everybody for watching. The really early playoffs make it so there's a little less to look at forward to, but come closer to the end, we'll have quite a bit to discuss. Thank you. I'll see you next time.